22 kids. The other person had 29. And that was no joke. And we went, speaking of bodies, and Amanda, you are the perfect person to speak to about this, okay? So as we get older, right, particularly I'll mention females because predominantly most of my clientele are females with this problem. And I've got 3 current females at the moment that all of a sudden they're probably in their late 60s, right? And I do see it before, I'm sort of just talking now, the pelvic floor starts to be affected. So, and I see the change and the degeneration, and, you know, there's also embarrassment. There's also, I've had clients that have not told me they've had the problem for quite some time, not mentioned anything because they've been embarrassed. And it's not till that we start to talk that's when they start to feel normal, that it's not just them. So they can go, I've sort of seen, apart from like post-childbirth and things like that, but just, you know, a woman in their 40s, generally 50s, and then their bodies start to make these changes, and all of a sudden they sneeze or they cough, or, you know, they can't hold on. They've got a quick urgency, you know, to go, and that's really embarrassing for women. So are you able to explain a little bit why that happens around this age group and what some women can do to help that?
I always like to preface with, you may not like my answer.
I'm aware of that.
It's important to bring up because, you know, the pelvic floor and incontinence comes up a lot, specifically around, as you just mentioned, postpartum. Mm-hmm. And you can understand that, right? We've had massive trauma come through the body, and, you know, a birth, as wonderful as it may be, is trauma to the body. Mm. Yeah. And those tissues have been stretched, and they have a neurological repatterning that needs to happen. Not everybody does their pre-work like they should for a pregnancy to happen. Not everybody does their post-work like they should to regain the tissues coming up. I'm going to go back to what we do most often is what will make the biggest impact on our tissues going forward. So I'm going to create a little image for you right now that says, I want you to think of a rosebud that is just about to open its petals in the springtime. So it's taken through winter, it's gone through its hibernation, it's now ready to come out, it's still closed, and then eventually it's going to create that flowering, it's going to open, it's going to bloom, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be the show rose. And then after a certain amount of time, that rose is going to start to wilt, and it's going to lose its vibrancy, and then the petals are going to fall off, and then it's going to disappear, and the whole cycle will begin again. And that's what happens to the human form as well. But as a human, we don't want to see that. So as we go through our life from the beginning, if we think about, we're talking women again, you know, through your early menstruation days, that's the flower blooming. Then you're going to have your baby and, you know, be in the prime of your life and all that kind of stuff. And then there's going to be a place where post-menopause will happen, and the degeneration of the system is going to happen. There is not a lot we can do to reverse that. We are not immortal, and it just is one of those things that the tissues are going to get lax. It doesn't mean that you have to go, oh, well, I'm doomed, that's it, I'm out of here. What it means is if you have that awareness, you can start putting things into place a lot sooner than when you get to 65 and start to have incontinence and think, oh, well, this is it, right? So if you are moving correctly, if you understand to move from your hip joints and from your pelvic joints where the pelvic floor is housed, and you're doing, you know, you're not standing with your pelvis tucked under constantly or turned the other way constantly or only standing on one leg, or, you know, all these things are then going to have the impact in the tissues going down. In women particularly, post-menopause, we're definitely going to have alterations to our structures as well because we lose certain hormones. And that is another topic as well. Like, yes, there's hormone replacement therapies, but at the end of the day, the cycle is that we are degenerating. And that's not a great thing to be able to hear us say. Things like creating, I mentioned in the beginning, intra-abdominal pressure. So that is, if you have to force yourself to go to the toilet and you do that kind of a bracing, if you are, even lifting heavy weights and things like that, notice how you naturally will brace the system because you're preparing for whatever the thing is. Like if I pick up my water bottle, it's going to be a very different abdominal contraction and bracing than if I pick up my pen. Right. So if I'm going to pick up a 20-pound kilo or a 20-pound weight, that's again going to be like a totally different scenario. But if I have to hold that kind of pressure and then not be able to exhale and release the pressure, that's creating pressure in that cylinder of support, which again will have an impact on the pelvic floor. Breathing is a huge one that will impact pelvic floor health. I think I've covered quite a lot of that. So breathing, posture as in not just like my upper spine, but how I stand in everyday life, movement, and then going to the toilet, whether that be, elimination from one side or the other, like all of those. Sexual things are also going to be involved with how that pelvic floor works. And then another thing to just think about is, what is the definition of continence? So continence is when the structure below is able to support the pressure from above. Then I don't have a problem. So then I can laugh, sneeze, jump, cough, do all those things, and I'll be okay. It's when the pressure above is not supported by the structure below. So that's either I've had, multiple years of being in a different organization. I have over years and years held my breath or not breathed properly, or I've never dealt with the trauma of a birth or an accident or anything like that through that area. I've been constipated all my life and I've never sought help because I thought that was just the way it was. All those kind of things, they lead to the end result. So like I said, you may or may not like my answer, but that's what I have for you.
I think that's great. It's normalized everything because, like what you said, we all don't like the word degenerate, but it's a fact of living. We can put our head under the pillows for as long as we like, but still we have to come out eventually. We can't stay there forever. And, I think it's really good because there's a lot of, for the listeners there that, might not know where to go or who to turn to. Can they contact you, Amanda? Do you do your sessions, like do you do I know that you do a lot of sessions, personally, I know that you do a lot of sessions, anyone could be anywhere in the world, but can they contact you, to work with them and, are you able to help them like that?
Absolutely. I do Zoom sessions everywhere around the world. So I've had people from like Cuba to England and the US and all over the place. So yeah, that's the beauty of, things like Zoom, right? We can be accessible as and when. Time zones are sometimes a challenge, but there's always a way around it. Yeah. And then, like we've been having this discussion earlier, if my skill set is stopping at a certain point, then I know that I have the ability to say to somebody, hey, let's refer you to a women's health specialist in wherever you are. So that kind of thing. What I do find, though, is like, I've had two instances with one, which was a woman who'd just given birth. She was 6 weeks postpartum, and she'd had an episiotomy, and her tailbone, her coccyx, was incredibly painful. And she went to go see a women's health physiotherapist, and the physiotherapist, I think, was quite young and had said to her, oh, you'll just have to deal with that. There's nothing we can do with it. And she knows me. And she came to me and she's like, I need to see you. And she told me her story. And I did one movement with her. I put her on a ball to release the pelvic floor. So I sat her on a ball. Within 60 seconds, her pain went. And she was like, oh, I don't understand. And I was like, well, you had an episiotomy, which moved your tailbone out to the side. So now your muscles are on stretch on one side and tension on the other. So I release you there, not me, the ball did the work. And then your alignment comes back together. And she just literally burst into tears and said, how come they didn't tell me that? And I was like, because that's not the way they're taught. And that's okay, but it's good to get that global perspective. I was going to tell another story, but I'll leave that. But yes, people can definitely contact me, and if I'm not the right fit, then I'm happy to to share who I think would be.
Yeah.
Excellent. Because also I know with men, I've had clients with prostate cancer. And it's interesting because I was just appalled the fact that these poor men who don't really use their pelvic floor are expected to all of a sudden use this pelvic floor post-surgery. And I had no idea or no awareness of the importance or the lack of education until it was pointed out to me, and how these men were just expected to have a diminished quality of life in lots of different areas. So, they were dealing with the incontinence, as well as erectile dysfunction. How much more degrading can it be for a man? And the quality of life, I was just astounded that this information wasn't passed on to the man pre-surgery. And I just thought there's just such a lack of care. Like it was, it really upset me, the fact that this knowledge wasn't passed on for the men, of how simple some exercises that they can do prior, surgery will help their their recovery post-surgery, and how it can, make their continence, a lot easier, or incontinence a lot easier. So are you able to throw some light on that, Amanda? Because I know we've got some men listening, and I know I know there's some men out there with prostate cancer.
So a lot of the men that I see have prostate cancer, and I think it's a bit of a relief, to be honest, because Alina, I'm just referring to Alina Shamala because I know her so well this way, but I think between you and I, we are those type of personalities that's like, there's a problem, let's talk about it. It's not like we hide the shame, because no one should feel shameful about their pelvic area, right? Yeah. So I have an anatomy app that I bring out at every session. And I show people, this is your pelvis. These are the muscles. Here are the tubes from the kidneys going through to the bladder. Here's the bladder. Here's the prostate. This is the effect. Here's the rectum. Can you see the relationship? Do you understand how this is balancing on top of that? So no one's ever showed them what their pelvis looks like. Because again, it's one of those taboo subjects. So I have a lot of success with men who, start to fill out a form and put prostate cancer on. And my first question is, do you know anything about where it's located, what it is? And let's go from there. And it's a very, very powerful time for them, because it gives them back that empowerment of, oh, no wonder that feels that way, or if it's been removed. We do a lot of mind-based work. So using imagery, it's like, energetically, that prostate is removed, but physically it's removed, but energetically it's not. So can we envisage it being there and healthy and flourishing and all those wonderful things that it's meant to do for us? Again, the same thing is like, as they're going through their surgeries, like, I had a gentleman, he was one of my favorite guys. He was just so brutally honest with me, and I appreciated it so much, because I think, obviously me not understanding his body that way, I could learn so much from the things that he said. And one of them was, he said, I can't come to Pilates. And I said, why not? And he said, because they want me to take Viagra and I'm scared I'm going to have an erection the whole time. Which I thought was great. But, the fact that he could say that to me, and I could be personable and say to him, you know what, it's okay. You don't have to come to your session that week, or, and then post, it is demeaning, isn't it, to have to wear a nappy after surgery because you have no control over what's going on. I like to tell people, like, it's a short amount of time. Right now, it feels like the end of the world, but your body is going to heal. You have to give it the space to heal. You have to give it the time. You have to give it the environment. If you mess with any of those things, it's going to delay the healing process. So let's just be in the nappy for 3 weeks or 4 weeks that you have to be there. And then we can move on with what we need to do. Don't go out for your run. Don't go out and don't try and, pretend you're not having to do what you need to do. Own it, and let's work with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's not just men, right? As women, when you're pregnant, you go and see the doctor. The lack of preparation, there is no education given to women when they're giving, and you have to do that. I mean, if you are aware of your body and you know what needs to be done, you will go and do your own research. You prep yourself and you know what to do post surgery and or post giving birth. But most women, they have no idea how it works. And I had this conversation in passing with someone. This was like several years ago. And through the conversation, I realized that this person, she's a mother of a few children. She didn't realize that, I mean, we were just joking also, right, in that whole conversation. And she didn't realize that there are three holes. And I was quite shocked, and I thought, is she joking? Is she? And I realized she wasn't joking. She didn't realize. And I thought, then how did she give birth? How did she go through the whole process, not knowing or not understanding your own body? And it's common. It was shocking.
It's too common. And if we go back to that analogy that I used of the body being your vehicle, you don't have to open the hood and see how the electrics are working, or even, when the water is running low, you're just going to let somebody else take care of it. You do not need to know, because someone else will do it for you. But for us to not have an innate understanding of what is going on, that a woman will have three holes, but a male will have two, like, these are fundamental differences, and it is important to know these things. At what point do we tell people? I don't know. Does it start at school education? Might be too much for some people, but definitely if you're going to be having a child and birthing something, you need to know what's going on. And like you said, the post-care, I'm not calling anyone out here, but like, honestly, from what I hear, and no, I've never given birth myself, but it's shocking how little information they give you to heal one of the most traumatic things I think a female body can go through.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've got a very good friend. She's about to give birth in 3 weeks, and it's her first one. And it's interesting because a lot of people would fill her head with all these different scary stories as first-time mothers are, vulnerable for that. And I've said, just ignore them, because another mother should know better. Right. So this is your time, your thing. I'm not going to tell you about my experience because mine's unique, and I will help as much as you can. But I remember with my own babies, I thought there was just so much emphasis on the pregnancy and not so much the aftercare. And then I realized that because you could not relate to it, because it wasn't something that you were experiencing. It's like, transformations, Shamala, what we've spoken about before then, when I've been trying to cut into around that 30-year-old, age group and tell them about these are all the problems that you can avoid if you do them now. But it's insignificant because it's not a problem. So I do understand that, collectively, but then also, when they've had their babies, like, there is a lot of information about the care. So they'll talk about breastfeeding, they'll talk about sleeping and things like that, and the baby and getting enough sleep, but they don't generally talk about, post-care, like what we've been talking about. Yeah. Because as a woman, I think you're expected to know.
Yeah.
And if there's a problem, you're going to see the doctor.
And, when the baby comes, all attention on the baby, right? No one cares about the mom, and you have to find your own way. You really have to find your own way. And if you don't know, and I'm not sure whether this happens in Australia a lot, but in Singapore, it's very, very common. It's too common, it's scary that people are given elective cesarean. Like, you choose the time, the day that you want your baby to be born. And so because they only experience the surgery, they don't experience the, giving birth through the vagina, they have no idea. And maybe that's why the person that I spoke to had no idea there were 3 holes. She thought like it was normal just to cut open and take the baby out. It's just, it's crazy, that this sort of thing happens. And I hear that is mostly because, the doctors want to have control of their time. And so they decide, okay, what time, what day you will take the baby out then.
So I grew up in South Africa, and it was the same thing. It's like you schedule when your baby's going to be born, what day, what time, and it's around the doctor's playtime. So I want to play golf on Thursday, so nobody gets delivered on Thursday. Or I'm going away to Europe for 3 weeks, so let's bring you forward a few weeks, or let's push you out, or my locum will take care of it if need be. So that's how I grew up with understanding of babies being delivered, was through cesareans as well. And it wasn't until I moved to the UK that I was like, my friend had a baby and she has to go through labor and give natural birth. And I was like, what? That's weird, but if, the statistics are out there, I'm not going to quote them because I don't have them at hand, but cesarean delivered babies versus a natural delivered baby, there are a lot of health differences between those two. And what you'll find mostly is symptoms of respiratory issues and learning issues. So it all has to do with brain development. And if you are not pushed through the canal, there's a certain thing that happens when the head goes through the canal that stimulates the beginning of, the brain's already working from in the womb, but it's the next phase of something happening. When they come out from the cesarean, it doesn't mean their brain's not working, but they've lost that first spark happen. So, there's lots of stuff going on. And if you just look at the world now of, autistic spectrum and, ADHD and dyslexia and OCD, all of those things are related to how we're delivering babies, how we're letting babies live in the world. Kind of stimulus are we giving them too soon? Again, like I said, on my next time here, we can, we can delve into something.
Oh, it's interesting because I've got another client. She's due in in about 10 weeks' time, 10 or 12 weeks' time. So it's her second child. So she's already got one that was he's 5, and she desperately wanted natural birth, and she had a beautiful plan, but she ended up having to have emergency Caesar because the cord was wrapped around his neck. Now, because it's been quite some time since, her second in between pregnancies, her obstetrician said you would have, she's moved into state, mind you, so she's, her obstetrician that she had said, not a problem, there's no reason why you can't have a natural birth, because she really wanted to experience it. However, she's now just turned 40. And the new obstetrician that she's with had a really good chat to her about the differences between Caesar and natural birth. Now, it went against all her grain, because to her, she just wanted a spontaneous birth, a spontaneous arrival time. She didn't want it to be controlled or didn't want anything like that. So, and the same thing, we only do the Caesars on this day or that day. It's probably another conversation another time, but he listed all these. She took her husband with her, and he really felt that the obstetrician had her best interest at heart. And basically, and it was an eye-opener for me from what I do, because you never stop learning. I thought, okay, here's a specialist, but this is something I never stopped to think about. Your recovery at 40, he said, would be a lot quicker than what it would be natural birth. And I went, oh, okay. And she listed a few reasons. And also, too, I thought, well, I suppose I had my babies at, late 20s and 30s. So I went, okay, all right, not a problem. But also that her ability to bounce back, post-surgery, birth was a lot quicker. Yes, she'd have to, be mindful of the 6 weeks after, birth, but her ability to heal was a lot quicker. And I thought, that's interesting. How did these women on farms cope? Because we were talking about, recently my partner and I were talking about, he came across a person, they work on the farms, they breed for help on the farms. One person he met had 22 kids. The other person had 29. And that was no joke. And we went, all I could think of was like, oh my God, that was 22 pregnancies or 22 births. I know, it was amazing. So I don't know any more details. I just know that there was a lot of babies.
If you go back to the thing I like to say, we get better at the things that we do most often.
Yeah.
If you're having babies 22 to 29 times, you're pretty used to it. So your body
yes.
how to
Yeah,
recover.
I know.
If you've had a child once and then another one 5 years later, if you had the cesarean the first time, your body doesn't understand what's going to happen if you have a natural birthing afterward. But the reason you had a cesarean was because there was a complication potentially. So there's a higher likelihood that you may have another complication. So if you've had a cesarean, there's going to be scar tissue there, which means, coming out of the birth canal might not be as easy again. And the reason why maybe is because that pelvic floor is too tight. Everyone's worried about a loose pelvic floor, but the majority of people are walking around with massively over tight pelvic floors that are not able to open and stretch and let the baby come out. So like those kind of things, yes, if you've had a cesarean first, sometimes it actually is a better option to have the second one as a cesarean again, because you want the best for the delivery. You want the health of the mother, you want the health of the child. It's that simple. And yeah, sometimes you have to go again in that ego mind of like, what is the best solution for my baby and my health? Not did I tick the box, natural birth or C?
Yeah, well, I'm a firm believer that, that should not be the first choice, obviously, go natural until you really need to. And then, then you just have to be flexible, as you say, Alina. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because I know, we see them all, just on social media, like all the people that we don't know, the ones that we just scroll and we go, oh, we're having a gender reveal party. And, so we know it's a girl. And then the name is coming. We know the date. And, we know the time. And, everything is all planned. And which is great if that's their choice, that they want to do. But I know when I had my first baby, and I kept saying to the midwife, oh, because I could hear a bit of noise next door. And I go, oh, is that another baby born? Because I'm still there. And they said, oh, that's all right. This is her third baby. She's fine. And I go, oh, okay. But I heard the conversation. And, the good old days, there was no mobile phones, right? And the good old, the dial up, the telephone on the stand that we all used to see in the hallways. And then they'd be making the calls to tell about the baby. And then, it would be, I just heard the tone. And I went, oh, yeah, no, she's had Millie. Yep, no, they're doing really well. And yep, 8 pound 3, la, 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 la. Yep, no, great. Yep, not a problem. Whereas, when we were making the calls, it was like, it's a girl or it's a boy. But I just really noticed a difference in tone because everything was all expected.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it does come down to personal choice and preference, but me personally, I like the surprise.
Yeah. Well, technology has changed so much, right? That they can even do imaging. Like they can see how the baby looks like even before the baby's born. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah.
that. That's frightening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really good conversation from body movement to pregnancy.
To prostate cancer.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, we definitely need to have Amanda back again. This was really, really very educational. And I'm sure, our listeners have really benefited from this, this chat that we're having. So before we end this conversation, Amanda, do you have anything you want to plug in, anything you want to share, or your website, anything you want to, you want people to know?
If you want to work with me in person, then you can contact me through my website, which is connectedpilates.com.au. It's a special way of spelling connected. It's a mix of words, KINECTED. The other thing that I have is a YouTube channel where I have a lot of information, but I also do every week I upload a 15 to 20 minute workout, which is very it's based for the person who's already able to do a bit of movement. So if you're in a massive rehab situation, that's not going to be where you're going to go. But I have, it's called a Move Me series. So, it just takes things on the mat, really easy to do when you travel or if you have small apparatus and that at home, just because I believe that everybody deserves to move functionally and every day. I'm not saying you have to do it every day, but if you can put simple movements into your life even 3 times a week, then at least you know that your body is going to have this longevity for as long as you want to be here. Yeah, so those are probably the 2 places, is my website, Instagram, or my YouTube channel.
Okay, we'll have all your details in the description below, and that will be, yeah, if people want to connect with Amanda, please watch out for all her details below.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an amazing conversation. I love how, the brief was, there is no brief. We will just have a conversation. So that's been wonderful, because sometimes you can be like, I don't know what to say.
Goodbye from Alina Anderson here at Noosa, Queensland, Australia.
Yeah, bye everyone. This is Shamla Tan from Singapore. See you all soon.